Good morning, everyone. My name is Claire McElroy. I am with Whatcom County Library System, and I would like to welcome you to the final event in this year's Whatcom Reads celebration. This last event is a conversation between our featured author, Sasha taqʷšəblu LaPointe, and Kristen Millares Young. Before we get started, we'd like to acknowledge that although this event is taking place online, WCLS buildings are on the ancestral homeland of the Nooksack, Lummi, and other Coast Salish peoples. They are the original inhabitants of this place. They are fishers, hunters, gatherers, and harvesters of nature's abundance, and have been doing so since time immemorial. We are neighbors and friends, and we are grateful for our numerous opportunities to learn, live, and grow together, building lasting relationships so all may prosper. A few words about Whatcom Reads, our community-wide reading program. Since the beginning, Whatcom Reads has been a team effort with representatives from Bellingham Public Library, Bellingham Technical College, Northwest Indian College, Western Washington University, Whatcom Community College, Whatcom County Library System, and our community partner, Village Books. Major funding for Whatcom Reads comes from Whatcom County Library System, the Friends of the Bellingham Public Library, the Whatcom County Library Foundation, and additional support from Western Libraries and Bellingham Technical College Foundation. And we would like to give special thanks to the Hotel Leo for providing accommodations for our authors for her visit to Bellingham. Thank you, Hotel Leo. So this has been a busy and invigorating Whatcom Reads season with programs about preserving the Nooksack language, writing family portraits, translating your family stories into songs, learning how Native values can teach resilience, and celebrating the achievements of Vi Hilbert, Sasha's great-grandmother, who is credited with rescuing the Lushootseed language from the brink of disappearance. Sasha herself has spoken multiple times, participating in a book discussion at the Deming Library, a writing workshop at Northwest Indian College's Log Building, on the Chuckanut Radio Hour, a variety show produced by our community partner Village Books, and a full house event at the Mount Baker Theater last night. And now she's here for one last event. Sasha, we're so grateful to you for all you have done these last 3 days. If you have a question for Sasha during the course of this event, please feel free to use the Q&A function that's at the bottom of your screen. We're going to get to as many of them as we can in the hour that we have today. And a little bit about Sasha. Sasha taqʷšəblu LaPointe is from the Upper Skagit and Nooksack Indian tribes. Sasha earned an MFA from the Institute of American Indian Arts. Her writing has appeared in many publications, including the Rumpus Literary Journal, To Indian Country Today, online at Huffington Post and Hunger Mountain, and in anthologies like Shapes of Native Nonfiction. Sasha writes primarily creative nonfiction and poetry. Critics named Red Paint a most anticipated book of the year. Time magazine called it absorbing, a worthy tribute to Coast Salish women. And Ms. Magazine said it is a poetically punk debut memoir about ancestry, loss, colonialism, rebuilding, power, hope, and healing. It got a starred review from Kirkus Reviews, which to us librarians is like gold. She also has a published collection of poems called Rose Quartz. And just last week, her brand new collection of essays, Thunder Song, was released, and it is simply gorgeous, as you can see. Morgan Talty, the author of Night of the Living Res, says the essays in Thunder Song are loud, bold, and startlingly majestic. None of Sasha's examinations fail to find truth. Page after page, the intersections of family, heritage, history, and music build to countless transcendental moments for the reader, which is not only the magic of this book, but a clear testament to Sasha's immense storytelling power. Welcome, Sasha. And here to interview Sasha is her friend and fellow author, Kristen Millares Young. Kristen did us the honor of being our first Whatcom Reads guest in this series when she presented her How to Write a Family Portrait workshop back in January, which now seems like a really long time ago. And now she's here to help us close out a phenomenal series for this last event. Kristen Millares Young is the 2023 Distinguished Visiting Writer for Seattle University and the University of Washington Bothell, MFA. She reviews books for the Washington Post and is the author of the novel Subduction, named a staff pick by the Paris Review and called Whip Smart by the Washington Post, a brilliant debut by the Seattle Times, and utterly unique and important by Ms. Magazine. Please welcome Sasha taqʷšəblu LaPointe and Kristen Millares Young.
I'm so honored to be here to welcome this conversation with you, Sasha. It is so good to see you. And I am just been so enjoying rereading Red Paint and then moving directly into Thundersong, which is such a worthy successor to this first book that you published, and which won a Pacific Northwest Booksellers Award, if I remember correctly. Yeah, so award-winning, and I believe a section of it came out in Vogue, right? Yes. Yeah. So it's been a really big year for you, and I was so glad to hear that Thundersong was named an Indie Next pick, which is such a strong recommendation by booksellers across the country. So it's really wonderful that your work is receiving the recognition it deserves.
Thank you. It's also so good to see your face.
I know.
I love the backdrop and the necklace and the top.
Yeah.
Thundersong, and like it's beautiful. The look is fire.
Actually, I wore this because of our inquiry today into what it means to inherit the wisdom and name of our ancestors. This belonged to my grandmother, and this shirt also belonged to my grandmother. So I am trying to honor this kind of intergenerational conveyance of knowledge and the heirlooms that are made possible by being in contact with our ancestors.
That's so cool.
Yeah. You know, I was so curious. Red Paint opens in the collective. I mean, it's an ancestral autobiography. Autobiography often, is narrated entirely from the first person, from the I. Why did you choose to begin with we?
Yeah, I love this question too, because I think that it would have been impossible to tell this story from like a singular voice in times, like these like stories of, Kamsha Kohalowish, Aunt Susie Sampson Peter, my great grandmother, of course, my mother. It's like, it doesn't feel like a singular or a story that is just mine. So it felt really important to ground the reader in that sort of collective voice.
And by doing so, it is you mentioned how important it is to hold back some of what you know. And so even though you're narrating from the we, you're exercising this discernment as the I. And as part of that, you specify that what happens in the Longhouse is not what this story is about. Why was it important for you to specify that?
I think that for me, it comes from a place of, just kind of great respect for what our Coast Salish ancestors were protecting. And I'm so sorry, the train is just popping off. I hope you can't hear it too much. I'm in my lovely apartment at Hotel Leo. I call it an apartment because it's the biggest hotel room I've ever been in, and it's so lovely. It's been amazing to live here for a few days, but I am right downtown Bellingham, so I apologize for the noise. Yeah, it's been very cool. It's been very amazing. But back to the question, I think too, right away when I was drafting Red Paint, like very early on in that process, I went to my mom, I went to my family and to my community to kind of ask for permission, not only to, and I know we'll talk about the actual Red Paint later, but not only to ask permission to wear it, but I had my mom read the draft to sort of check in to be like, is this okay? It's important we, respect our traditions and ceremonies. It's not something that I feel again like is solely my story to tell. And my mom definitely had some notes. She was like, oh, there are certain aspects of this culture that it would be considered extremely disrespectful to share. And so I, without question, took those parts out. And again, I think this is just a very long-winded way to answer and say it's coming from a place of respect and knowing what is appropriate to share and what isn't. Yeah, comes from respect to the culture.
Well, your family does have what I found so, so invigorating is that one of your ancestors was the very first woman to be named a medicine worker. How do you think that came about? This way of being and this knowing that had been contained or like kind of named as being masculine,
Mhm.
right? Being brought into the care of your ancestor who was a woman.
Yeah, I think that when my family has told me this story, I think that her father, who was also trained as a medicine worker, a healer, just recognized that strength and that power in her at a really young age and was like, this is not typically done, but you have this gift from the creator. And I want to like teach you and train you in these ways because I think that he recognized that ability in her.
So there's so much responsibility when narrating this story, and I really do feel your respect for how you invoked your surroundings and the cultural knowledge. And part of that is that your great grandmother, Vi Hilbert, who gave you her name, taqʷšəblu, right? Um, can you talk to us a little bit about who she was and her importance to the community?
Yeah, of course. She was a incredibly celebrated storyteller, and she was also a language revitalization activist. She in the 60s and 70s noticed that we were losing our elders and our fluent speakers, and so she, as a young woman, went around with a tape recorder recording elders tell their stories. And then she began the work of transcribing that and worked with linguists to create a written language for Lashutsi to like keep it from disappearing, to like fight against that language and cultural erasure. So she was a total badass and a huge inspiration to me. And she was also, I know that she's credited with all of these incredible things, right? And that her storytelling, her language work, her work with Lashutsi, her teaching are all of these things. But she was also like my great grandma, and like we had that. Like she had such an impact on me. And we had a closeness, as in her namesake. And also just like, sometimes I also forget, or I don't want people to forget that she was also just incredibly special and, taught me about storytelling and the importance of words. And I think really is a huge reason why I am a writer. Like, I think that I write because of her.
I mean, certainly her importance to our region and to the future cannot be overstated. I actually have a friend who's Suquamish and is partnered with a macaw man, Bo and Iyer Chica, and she is actually raising her two kids in Lashutseed, or their two kids in Lashutseed, because of the training that she received, which is part of, your great grandmother's legacy. And that is true. Even though the Macaw Nation also has incredibly strong revitalization and ongoing curriculum around their language. And part of that, I remember being out on Macaw Nation, and when your grandmother came to visit with two assistants, and everyone knew that she was in town, right? Like everyone knew. And so her importance and the kind of veneration that surrounded her is something that is really beautiful to see.
Yeah. Yeah.
So she gave you her name. What does that mean for you in terms of your responsibility to honor that name?
Yeah. I think that it's a great honor to be gifted a name, and especially by a woman. So, as we were just talking about, like such an amazing, like, you know, she did so much. And I think when I was younger, it was definitely, I don't want to say overwhelming, but like, whoa, you have like big shoes to fill. And so I think when I was younger, it was a little daunting, like, well, what am I going to do? Like, and she used to say, you're my namesake, you're going to do important things. So I think that it wasn't an option for me not to at least try. Like, I try to move through the world with grace, carrying this name and be inspired by her and feel called to, like, do the work that I want to do. I don't think that she would, allow me to just be like, oh, I'm going to give up, because writing is hard. And I would have given up so many times. I think I tried to, but knowing, that I carry this gift inspires me, and also feels like a really important and beautiful assignment. She liked to give assignments to everybody. Like, ooh, I have a job for you. Whether that's to my parents to make the documentary, or, for my uncle to create, to have painted and created. She had these assignments, right? And so I think that assignment is just with me every day. I hope that makes sense.
It does. And it is certainly, I like what you said about, trying to move through the world with grace, and like kind of accepting the true and like kind of lifelong responsibility that it is. And that you find inspiration from so many of your ancestors in red paint. Vi Hilbert certainly, appears and is very important to the book. And yet there's this other ancestor, taqʷšəblu, and her story becomes a central focal point for your examination and research. Could you talk a little bit about how you encountered her, and what you derived from learning about her life?
Yeah, absolutely. When my mother first told me about taqʷšəblu LaPointe, I was really sort of floored by her story. And when I started asking, my mom more questions and wanting to know more, it came at like a really difficult time in my life. And it was impossible not to. I remember my mom reminding me who taqʷšəblu LaPointe was during this challenging time, a time where I felt really overwhelmed and a little lost. And learning about taqʷšəblu was honestly like this beacon, like this lighthouse in the dark. Like, I really tethered myself to her story. When my mom reminded me, like, you come from this lineage, like, this is in your blood, this strength, and the things that she had to endure mean that, like, I don't know, it was amazing to focus on her resilience, her strength. At 9 years old, she was the sole survivor of the smallpox epidemic that wiped out her village. At 9 years old, and then of course went on to marry the settler. Oh my gosh, forgive me. It's been a long week. I'm not nearly as caffeinated enough. I did tell Claire, I was like, I'm going to zoom in from the hotel in my PJs. So that's the vibe we're at today. But yeah, I think that taqʷšəblu LaPointe, having married this settler who, was came over with Hudson Bay and was one of the founding, first settlers of that town. Like, there's a street named after him. There was, but, having married him, and he got twice the allotment of land, because any white person marrying a native person in those days got twice the allotment of land. But then at the edge of the property, he built this little 4-wall, like, dirt floor shack that is where she lived. And so that story, just like to have to live in that time and to have survived so much, is, to me, it speaks so hugely of strength. And I really kind of used that as a guiding, sort of grounding, how can I move through this challenging time in my life? I really looked back to taqʷšəblu, to women like Aunt Susie Sampson Peter, these basically incredible Indigenous women that accomplished a lot and survived so much.
I noticed that when you visit Ilwaco, the town heritage museum kind of depicts taqʷšəblu and her husband, the captain, as like a first family of Ilwaco. What was it like for you to receive that depiction?
It was really intense to see. I remember the first time I saw that placard, like on the house. The house is still there. Even the shack is also still standing. It's a historical site, and it had the little placard on it. That was really intense to see. I Yeah, I don't know how else to answer that other than it kind of carried a lot to see this man's name everywhere and to see that, yeah, that they were regarded as one of the first families of El Waco. But nobody was talking about the fact that she lived in the shack on the edge of the property line and wasn't allowed in the main house. So that was like, there's an intense intensity to that kind of information and seeing it in real time. Like, oh, yeah.
So we have some questions coming in from the audience that I'll get to in just a second, but I feel like this talking about receiving the intensity of that information. You wrote that excavating your trauma for your MFA thesis was akin to, quote, slowly unlocking a Pandora's box without any tools or instructions on how to close it again. And so you're now a celebrated teacher of creative writing. I'm really excited to be on the faculty with you at Port Townsend Writers Conference in July at Fort Worden. That's going to be amazing. And you help emerging storytellers to convey like very difficult truths. So what tools or instructions do you give them about how to handle the wound of writing and the intensity of the information that they're seeking for their writing may bring into their lives?
One of my most important, I think, one of my most important lessons that I learned, because, I mean, I'm thankful for that Pandora's box being open, but I wish I had had more care and more awareness as a young writer, as an emerging writer, what that was going to do. And so that was a huge lesson for me to learn. And it's one of the biggest things I tell my students when we're like mucking around in memory and memoir and like our past experiences, like to always listen to themselves. I wish I had like listen to, if you are not ready to write this, do not charge ahead recklessly into it. Like be kind and like careful with yourself, because you don't have to write that hard story right now. You can come back to it later, and to always make sure you have a support system, whether that looks like your community or partner or family or therapy, to really like not just charge ahead into these really painful or traumatic memories, that they can write them later from a stronger place, is one of the biggest lessons I learned. And so I try to share that with my students while also nurturing like please, we need your voice, we need your stories, but if you that doesn't mean you have to write it right now if you are not ready. Because I wish someone would have told me that when I just blindly paraded into the world of little boats.
I was thinking while reading Red Paint, which deals with, of course, these, origin stories and these traumas, but also is a story of you finding your strength and finds you in community and, in the punk community. So I was curious about what punk meant for your survival and endurance during that difficult time and what it means for you now that you are a celebrated writer and a musician.
Yeah, I think like so many younger misfit feeling folks, I was experiencing a lot of displacement and the feeling of being lost. And I think that chosen family is so important when you're like searching for that. And I think for me, in a lot of ways, one of the positives, because I also had a lot of critiques of the punk scene, right? But it meant a lot to me, as in that it provided for a time like that I needed it, a safe harbor, a place to meet other freaks and weirdos that were going to care and nurture my little baby goth heart. And that's still such a like part of my life today, like surrounding myself with chosen family, with folks that I love and care for. Even with this beautiful Whatcom READS event, I had 3 of my favorite humans like coming with me to the events and staying with me. And so that's family. That's my family.
Speaking of family, and this is a question from Nancy Canyon, she would like to know, as your namesake, which of your names is the same as your great-grandmother's?
Taqʷšəblu is the Skagit name she gifted to me, and my middle name is also, I'm named after her mother, so my great-grandmother, but Taqʷšəblu is my great-grandmother's Skagit name.
So thank you for that question, Nancy. And then Jeff Dodge also has a question. He says, "Hi, Sasha. A short story I wrote was published in the Whatcom READS anthology this year. It's his first time that a story has been published. So his question is more about writing. What is your writing process like? Do you do a lot of planning and outlining before actually writing? Or do you like to just dive in and start writing and see where it takes you?"
Well, congratulations on the publication. I'm excited to read it. And to answer honestly, I wish that I had more of a structured, process, but I really just, when it comes, it comes. And if I have I'll be up furiously till 2 a.m. writing orca poems for weeks, and then it'll kind of go away. Like it kind of comes and goes. And I try to just really knock it out when I'm feeling really inspired, because I'm sure other writers, Chris, experience this, but sometimes it's just not there. And so I respect writers who sit down and have it every morning at 6 a.m. I sit, I have my tea, and I write. I love that. I don't do that because sometimes it just doesn't come to me like inspiration. And so then I won't write for a few days or a week or a month, and then I'll write my butt off till 3 in the morning or something. So my process is chaos, pure chaos.
A very fertile place. I really love this question from the audience, so I'm going to ask it. During Whatcom Reads, you spoke beautifully about place and how it informs your writing. It was interesting and fun for us to see local places depicted through your eyes in red paint. On this beautiful Saturday, if you stopped at Teddy Bear Cove on the way home, what would you say to your younger self who once camped on the beach there?
Oh, I would say, it's good that you're here right now, but this is not your forever place. And don't worry, you're going to find it. And now go jump in the water and have a good day.
Have a good day, right? Enjoy the life. The life will always bring its sorrows, but this kind of reorientation towards joy is something that I really, really appreciate about your journey and about what you share in Red Paint and in Thundersong. So I was curious, in the wake of your near drowning on your wedding night, you wrote, "All I could see in the river was story." Why do you feel that you saw story in the river, and where else do you see it?
I think that water has always held a lot of significance for me. I see story in the ocean, in lakes and bodies of water, in creeks when I walk along Swan Creek and see tiny little salmon doing their thing. I think water is so powerful and important. As a Coast Salish woman, I feel like a spiritual connection to the water. And so I see story there a lot.
I am very lucky to be on a text thread with you where you shared a photo of your time on the beach, kind of witnessing protocols during the tribal journeys. Could you talk a little bit about what that was like for you? And given, of course, the confluence of community and water and story.
Yeah, canoe journeys is such a beautiful experience. I think it's such a wonderful moment for especially Coast Salish people to come together and see our traditions just alive and well and thriving. And especially this year when, even though it was paddle to Muckleshoot, the paddlers came up on shore on Alki Beach and just kind of took over this beach. And it was one of the most beautiful things. I cried. I was like, this is so incredible. Normally Alki Beach is a place where folks are playing volleyball and drinking beer and it looks like a beer commercial. You know what I mean? Now it's oh no, excuse me, rollerbladers. No shade to anyone who's just hanging out on Alki Beach like that. That's awesome. But to see that many Native folks come on shore and celebrate and sing songs and be just deeply proud of who they are and our traditions was just so incredible to witness.
Absolutely. And along those lines, another great question from the audience. They ask, can you say more about how your community supports you? You mentioned you had friends here with you during Whatcom Reads, and you also seem to always uplift other writers in your presentations. How does community contribute to your life?
Again, I think it's just like I spoke about chosen family, and that's like a very real concept for me. A place, where you kind of have to carve out community that like supports you and that you support, and it's like this. You have to find that, and I think I cultivating really important like connections and friendships is what sustains us, what sustains me, and yeah.
So you have been, I'm curious myself, you have been in California, you've been splitting your time between there and your ancestral homes. One of the beautiful moments in Red Paint is talking about your acquisition of an ancestral home in Tacoma. Could you talk about how that went down?
That my great grandmother, I think, was taking care of me, even, from the spirit world. And like out of nowhere, we got the news that she had left some ancestral land to me, which I, sold back to the tribe. I was like, I don't need this, but it did help me find a home eventually. I think that was just her taking care of me from spirit realm. Like, oh, here, this might give you some direction.
And I mean, you've lived in quite a few places in the state. What is Tacoma like for you? What's the community like there?
I love Tacoma. It took a moment, of course, I grew up visiting my grandparents' home in Tacoma, I had family in Tacoma. So that's not an unfamiliar place to me, but I hadn't lived there. And it was a strange thing to kind of uproot myself from the life I had, built in Seattle. I lived on Beacon Hill for like, gosh, 16 years or something, worked at a pizza place in Georgetown. So it was really strange, a little bit jarring at first to, uproot myself and plop myself down in a city that I didn't know much about. But it's really grown on me. And I've met some of my favorite people there. I've got one of my best friends, lives a few blocks away from me. It's been really cool. I like to say that Tacoma reminds me of Seattle in the 90s. Like it's still a little gritty. Like there's a really cool record shops and vintage shops, and then like a Jiffy Lube. But like it's like there's a grit to it that has like this 90s Seattle vibe, and I love that. That's after my heart. So I really like Tacoma.
Yeah, I wondered actually the music scene, like if it's punk or like if it has that aspect that would speak to your spirit.
Yeah, one of the very first shows I went to, I didn't know anybody yet in Tacoma, and I found out that one of my favorite bands, this really cool post-punk band called Arctic Flowers, was just playing at King's Books, like a really cool bookstore in the city. And I was like, this is like the intersections of my most favorite, like, what? I get to go see Arctic Flowers at a bookstore. And I think right away I was like, okay, I love Tacoma. Tacoma has my heart.
Tacoma loves you back. And actually, this is a question from one of the audience members. They would like to know what are some of the highlights for you from the last few days in Bellingham? If you return to the Horseshoe Cafe, or do you find some new favorites?
Um, yeah, we actually, I think some of the highlights, I'll start there. That first dinner, like we had this when my friend Allie and I arrived, we were invited to the Village Books dinner where Chef Christie, shout out to Chef Christie, this was the coolest experience I've never, never in a million years experienced anything like this, and it was dreamy, it was magical. She created an entire menu based off red paint, and there was so much thought and story into each of the dishes. I think I cried a couple times. It was just so moving to see that sort of interpreted in these really delicious foods. And like, oh, I haven't eaten like that well in a really long time. I'm gonna stop rambling about it, but it truly made me emotional. It was really beautiful. Like food is so important to me. It sustains us, it nurtures us. And so to have that much thought put into it, just I'm still blown away. Last night at the Mount Baker Theater, that was also a first time. Like I've never experienced anything like that. Like, it was great. It was, yeah, okay. So that's a highlight. We also had really good food last night. Like afterwards, we popped over to a place and just, got noodles. Where were we? What was the place? Red Light. And we just like talk about it. It was a self-care nurturing moment. Like, this week has been so incredible. And I just have this massive gratitude. And like, I'm still kind of reeling from some of these events. And last night it was so good just to like curl up in bed, and we got a giant pile of noodles and watched RuPaul's Drag Race. And it was just a very needed rest.
One of the attendees for the Mount Baker Theater presentation is here and said that it included some amazing writing prompts. And they said that BTV 10 will be rebroadcasting the presentation in a week or so. But in the meantime, would you mind sharing one or two prompts with people who are attending today?
On the fly. Let's see.
Mm-hmm. Sip of coffee.
I think one of the prompts from last night is just such a cool one. I'm a huge fan of lyric and hybrid forms. I'm a fan of like getting weird with it and experimental. And so one prompt I like to give is a persona poem or piece of prose, but in the voice of your favorite mythic creature. So if you take, like, let's say a hard memory, a moment maybe in which you were scared or went through something really challenging, like what happens if you tell that story through the persona of a werewolf? Like, is a werewolf going to be scared? Like, I just love experimenting with genre and cross genre. And so the persona poem or, essay, but in the voice of a mythic creature that gives you strength. I think that's a fun one. It's a wild one, but
that is wild, and I love it. You gather a lot of things. I mean, you gather elements from mythologies that extend beyond your own lineage. You gather stories from your family. You gather materials for your altars. Could you talk a little bit about what you bring together so that you feel that strength and safety? It could be some of the materials. You talk about them a bit in Rose Quartz, but yeah.
Yeah, I think I try to have a lot of intention around my spaces. I mean, I'm living in a little hotel, but look, I've got flowers and like I've decorated already. Like, but I think that that's actually rooted in something deeper for me. Like, my spaces are really important to me. My partner's house in San Diego, I brought like a mountain of like shells and baskets and these things that are really important to me to then like feel safe in that space. I'll bring cedar. Yeah, I bring pictures of my ancestors. So I think that creating that safe space is not just an aesthetic thing for me ever. It's literally to remind myself that I am safe and thriving.
Well, having seen or been part of a shared living space with you for just a week, I also felt the strengthening and safety that those materials brought into our space, and I'm looking forward to it again. I do have a question. You're teaching at Port Townsend, a morning workshop. What is it about?
Oh, I think I'm doing lyric and hybrid forms.
Nice. So, yeah.
Like, we're going to look at graded essays, different kinds of lyric forms, like sort of intertwining poetry and prose to tell like memoir. Yeah.
So I am curious, where else are you teaching?
I'm teaching at the Native Pathways program, and it's such a phenomenal program. I'm stoked to be there. I teach creative writing. The Native Pathways program is through Evergreen. It's its own program, but so I'm teaching there. And I think just for one quarter, I'll be teaching, popping in to teach creative writing at UW-T. So, yeah.
Yes, I noticed. I think was it your launch at Powell's that Dawn Pichon Barron was there, and she's also involved with the Native Pathways program.
Yeah, she's our director, and she's also an incredible poem. She's not Dawn is an incredible poem. I'm going to tell her I said that on Zoom. It's an incredible poet, and she was in conversation with me at the town hall event in Seattle.
So you wrote that in red paint, quote, "I realized I wasn't sure what permanence looked like because we weren't meant to survive." And then you also wrote, "My impulse to run, to be that girl who slept in bowling alleys and unfinished buildings, still crept up. She threatened everything." So what does permanence look like for you now?
I think understanding, and again, this goes back to occupying a safe space, a home. Literally, so much of red paint was like this journey looking for a home. I think permanence to me is now knowing that, like going back and forth, for example, between San Diego and Tacoma, like those are both permanent homes, like because that, because of that relationship, my partner, and yeah, permanence is like surviving too, if that makes sense. Like I'm here against all odds, like I'm alive and well. That is, a fight against impermanence. It's surviving.
Yes, you carry your line from thousands of years back, and you carry into so many different forms. Could you talk a little bit about Medusa Stairs?
Medusa Stair was the band I joined at the in red paint, but I had desperately wanted to be in a band since I was a little baby teenager, but because I was in a lot of like, punk dude spaces, it was like, no, you can sell our merch, but you can't be in a band with us. Like it was it was a dudes club. But when Medusa Stair approached me, like I was in my 30s already, but like little baby Sasha was like, what, for real? I can do spoken word and like go on the road with you amazing freaks. And it was so life-changing and inspiring, and I think helped like strengthen and remind me like that I can be loud, that I have a voice, and that like kind of came through and carried into my writing, like my poetry and the writing of red paint. um yeah.
So you are in another band now, though, right? Or you've been practicing over the years with a different band.
we Kari and I, so Kari was the drummer of Medusa Stair, and we started our own project. It's just like a freaky little two-piece. We're called Fleur de Louvre. We actually have a song out called Tulips, and for those folks who have picked up Thunder Song, thank you, but there's a essay when you get to it or read it, that came out of that song. The song came first. So yeah, we haven't played in a while. We're kind of on a hiatus, but that's been a really cool project too.
I love that. So it's from, in the opening of Red Paint, right? We have these epigraphs that are your family stories, and then you have your poem that you wrote, which brought you into a band, which then led to another band, which led to a song, which led to an essay. That beautiful, I mean, talk about seeing story in the river. This river that connects them all through across genres is so lovely. And it was actually for the tour for Medusa Stair that you asked, or before the tour, that you asked if you could wear the red paint. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit about red paint and what it means for you to wear it, and what it means also that your parents shared that with you.
Yeah, I want to give a little bit of backstory too, because when years ago, long before red paint or little boats even, I joined my mom to march with the Two-Spirit flag at Pride, and I knew that other folks, Two-Spirit folks, were going to be wearing their regalia, and so I was like, "Oh, Mom, should I wear red paint?" And she was like, "Absolutely not, like not appropriate." And I was like, "Oh, I was like 19. I didn't understand that we didn't wear it as an adornment. Like it wasn't just to be celebratory." And she like shut that down real quick and taught me that lesson. And I was like, oh, okay. Um, but when I came years later, having gone through, being diagnosed with PTSD, going through, there was a long time where I was really struggling to be okay. I wasn't okay in my spirit. And when I came to my parents again, I shared with them some of the work I was doing for healing, for my own healing, some of the writing I was doing, and they understood that what I was doing was like trying to create my own ceremony, one that, you know, pays homage and honors the people I come from. The red, you know, people in our longhouse ceremonies wear red paint to signify like the medicine workers, the healers. And so my mom was telling me and constantly reminding me during this really hard time in my life that she was like, remember, you come from that like lineage, that's in your blood. And so when I asked to wear red paint the second time, they understood that it was part of my healing process. And so they let me, yeah, they gave me permission, which was really important.
That permissioning, that permission seeking is a really beautiful moment of recurrence within red paint. And it seems that there is a fair amount of, well, actually, I want to bring this in from the audience. It says that in the Deming Library event, you read a poem about visiting a cedar dress that your great-grandmother donated to the Seattle Art Museum. The dress is on display there. The poem is incredibly powerful. Would you consider reading it again this morning?
Yeah, thank
Good.
you. Also, yeah, but I can share that. My
I'll pause for a second and just while you're searching for the poem, and just say how much I appreciate Claire's work and Whatcom Reads and bringing this whole presentation together. I love the community focus on this text, which is so important to understanding the lineage and ongoingness of this family and this people and this place. Thinking about the food that you ate, right? It's a way of bringing the land back into the body, and that the land and the food and the words and the song and the poem and the water and the family and the community are all one. So I'm really looking forward to hearing the poem, and I'll listen to you now.
Thank you, Kristen. I also want to thank Claire. This whole event, this whole week has just been incredible, and I feel nurtured and celebrated, and it's wild, and it's really cool to be able to say that out loud. Like, these events have been great. Like, people have fed me salmon and berries. Like, I'm excited. Like, so big shout out to the Whatcom Reads program and Claire. And Kristen, thank you for being in conversation with me today. Okay, so this is called, for folks who need context, there is a cedar dress at Seattle Art Museum that I've visited multiple times in moments of grief or loneliness, because I literally can just go up to a case and see this dress and know that my great grandmother wore it, and know that, you know, I have like images of her in it. It's a way to kind of visit her when I feel lonely. So I've literally done this, but multiple times. Cedar woven dress at Seattle Art Museum. The year I am born, they carve a maiden from the trunk of an ancient tree. My grandmother does the blessing, dressed in cedar, hands to the sky, feet at the tide, palms up, palms full of story. The maiden marries the sea, becomes ocean and sea kelp for him, a promise of fish returning, a union of abundance to keep her people from starving. I am born lonely, an inheritance of grief and wanting, muscle memory of seashell, and the fear of ever going hungry. For years, we swap the story. I watch the bones of her cheeks as they sink and star into barnacle. Everything dies eventually. I say it out loud to an empty gallery, words echoing museum white against a glass case encased inside the dress, cedar woven and donated. Every day I present to the shape of her my accomplishments, everything I've ever done an offering, pages, heartbreaks, trophies, degrees, awards, a stillborn. The display creates an illusion of body, ghost-like, the form filling up with nothing. I punch my fist through the glass as the alarm begins screaming. The people come running from the beach up the stairs to see me torn apart and bleeding, skin shredded, knuckles cut open and sparkling as they splinter like rubies in glass. I drag myself through the broken opening, clothing ripped, body gutted and glistening like fish. What's left is practically nothing. Skeletal, bone wet and shining. I crawl inside and the people are surprised when I don't slip into it. The dress, the cedar woven shape of her. They don't understand I never intended to fill it. Instead, a body cut like a promise, blood ribboning, I curl into her would-be arms, like a baby, like I used to be, the memory of being held by something like oceans, like language, like story, like grandmothers and whales and maidens who give themselves up freely to the deep to keep their people from ever going hungry.
I'm so grateful to you for bequeathing that poem upon us, and also to the audience member for knowing that it needed to come into this conversation. I have one more question for you, which is that, Red Paint is but the first of many books, right? You also wrote Rose Quartz, which came out on Milkweed Editions. And I'm so happy to report again that Thunder Song has been named an Indie Next Pick. And it's certainly, these books are in conversation with each other. So how do you see them as being connected, and from the past and into the future of your production?
I think, and my editor once said to never say this again, but I continue to. I think for me, Red Paint and Rose Quartz are the same story, just told in different languages to me. Like, one is prose, one is poetry, but to me, they're like sister books. They go like hand in hand together. Like I even wrote parts of those books simultaneously, like together, and I think Thunder Song as this continuation of, sure, there's like their essays, but there's a lot of memoir and personal narrative in there as well. And so not that it's like a sequel to Red Paint or anything, but some of those stories where I left off in Red Paint in my life, in my journey as a survivor, as a writer, kind of pick up again. So hopefully, hopefully I've learned more things, or like I've grown. But so that's a weird way to answer that. I'm so sorry. I think
No, I do. I love the various languages, right? I say ignore that advice from your editor. That's just true, right? It's just true. And you find so many ways to express this wisdom. It's multifaceted. I want to draw the audience members' attention to the links that have been dropped into the chat, which are to both the library versions and the Village Books versions of copies of Red Paint and Thunder Song. These books are in a definite conversation with each other that is ongoing. And as a final question, and then Claire can come in and take us home. One of our audience members would like to know, what music are you going to be listening to in the car on the way home?
Snotty Nose Res Kids, specifically 96 Bulls. It's just like my jam right now. It gets me like fired up. So probably a lot of Snotty Nose Res Kids, but also maybe some Hooray for the Riff Raff. Yeah, I'm going to be all over the place.
I love Hooray for the Riff Raff.
Yeah, do you know they're coming next week? I'm going to go.
Okay, I'm gonna text you about that. Well, thank you to everyone for holding space for this conversation. Thank you to you, Sasha, for writing such a beautiful book and then giving it to the community in this way. And thank you to Whatcom Reads. Claire, I'll let you come back on screen and close us out.
Thank you so much for this. This has been a great conversation. Sasha, it's been a great ride with you for the last 3 days. I have so enjoyed my time with you, and I'm honored by that. So I'm going to carry these memories with me for for always. So I did put links in the chat to, as Kristen said, the library pages where you can check out books by both of our authors, and then also from Village Books, where if you want to purchase them, that's always encouraged as well. And then let's see, the final link I put in the chat was to our evaluation form. We would love it if folks would give us some feedback, take a couple minutes to fill out that that form and let us know what we're doing right, what we can improve upon, how you heard about us, all of it. So thank you for taking the time to do that. So this is the time at which we announce the 2025 Whatcom Reads author and book. It was announced last night. Sasha got to do the honors of announcing 2025. Sasha, I don't know if you want to do it again or you want me to just do it right here? Okay. So 2025 Whatcom Reads author or book will be, I'm just going to have to hold this right up in front of my face so that you can see it, but it's No Two Persons by Erica Bauermeister. Oh, there it goes. There it is. We're very excited. The Whatcom Writes prompt is the book that changed my life. This year it was Legacy, and this next year it will be the book that changed my life. So with that, that's a wrap, folks. We're going to close out Whatcom Reads. Sasha, safe travels home. And Kristen, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been just wonderful. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay.